Just 4 words. James Enstrom, Stan Young. No, a little bit more than that. James Enstrom is a retired UCLA research professor and president of the Scientific Integrity Institute in Los Angeles. Great, distinguished career. Look at his CV. Everybody should look at everybody's CV. Stanley Young has worked at Eli Lilly, GlaxoSmithKline, and the National Institute of Statistical Sciences on questions of applied statistics. We're proud that he is also the director of our Shifting Sands project, forthcoming, adjunct professor of statistics. Much more to say some other time. And Stan Young first? Yeah.
Hello. I've been doing applied statistics for a long time. One of the challenges that I've set for myself over my career is to try and figure out what's real and what's not. And we're looking at a system that many people think is failing. It's a crisis. I like to portray it in the following way. If you're looking at some waves and you want to get to here, but you want to go in a smooth path where you make just small changes. So you can make small changes along here. You can go behind the wave, and then all of a sudden you find yourself on the top of the wave and you crash through. So we've gotten to a place where we've made small changes in how we do science, and now I'm going to make the argument that we're in a crisis, things are failing. You've seen this slide. I'll add one thing. Many scientists are personally impacted by bad science. They try and do another experiment and it fails. And then they go back and they say, why was I going in that direction? So a survey of real scientists who are impacted by this is quite worthwhile. Here, what doesn't fit? My car works. My cell phone works. The water comes out of the tap. All of those things work. They're all industrial. They're all depending on specific scientific and engineering principles. All the papers that come out of here, 70–80% of them don't work. This works. We all have them in our pockets. These are fantastically powerful instruments. They're incredibly complicated, and they work. Here are 2 papers that came out in the 90s on this environmental epidemiology, does air pollution cause deaths? Both papers were funded by the EPA. This paper came out, New England Journal of Medicine, 1993. This journal came out in Environmental Health Perspectives, another highly rated journal. This was positive, this was negative. And they both came out at about the same time. I would argue that there was a political decision by the EPA to fund people like this. I know these people, they were cut off with funding. What to do? What to do depends on the circumstances. You have workers. These are researchers. You have editors. You have funders. And mostly here, we are consumers of other people's work. Deming, a very famous industrial statistician, said, if the system is not working, do not depend on the workers to change it. The workers are very happy with what's going on. They're very happy with the status quo. So preaching to workers has not worked and is not expected to work. Editors, they control a lot of the system. The real control is with funders. So if we want to change the system, we have to get the funders and the editors to change the system. we are going to be enormously wasting our time if we preach to the workers. The workers are happy living within the system that they're in, and if they fail in that system, they go off and do something else. But the people that live in the universities are very happy with what's going on. Scientific incentives. There's been some discussion of that. You need a p-value less than 0.05. Positive results are funded. Negative results stop funding. So I would not publish a negative result because I will not get any more money. Confirmation bias. It's technically easy to get a p-value. Everyone knows that. You manipulate the data. You ask a lot of questions. You compute multiple models, and you just churn through that. And we'll see how much you can do it. This is usually not talked about. Skin in the game. If I am in industry, I sell a product. I don't sell a paper, I sell a product. If my product doesn't work, I fail. Industry fails. On the other hand, if I'm in a university, my product is a paper. In the military parlance, it's fire and forget. Put the paper into the literature and move on to something else. There is essentially no penalty for failing. Your claim doesn't work, who cares? This is a little intricate, so I'll read it to you. I was looking in Environmental Health Perspectives, a very prominent environmental epidemiology journal, and I simply took 8 papers that appeared in that journal, and I very meticulously went through each paper, and I counted the number of outcomes they were looking at, the number of predictors they were using to make those outcomes, the number of lags. This was a time thing, so things can happen today and affect something tomorrow. The number of covariates, age, gender, so forth and so on. You should be sort of seeing here, the number of questions is the first 4. And you can see in these 8 papers, they went from 3 all the way up to 560. Now, covariates can either be in the model or not. So a very simple approximation is to say 2 to the number of covariates. That's this column. Now, if you multiply questions times models, the numbers go all the way from 384 up to roughly 180,000. So this is the raw material that a modeler or person writing a paper has. And so when we talk about p-hacking, we need to know the scope of the possibility. The scope is enormous. Now, if people have said, oh, Stan, no one can test 180,000 models. We did it. We did a sensitivity study. We went on the web, and we used, Amazon, whatever, and we ran 170,000 models in an afternoon. You don't even have to be that brute forceage. All you have to do is keep trying this and trying that, and you get a lead, you fix that, and then you try the next thing. So sequential searching can very rapidly go through these large search spaces. There's another point. If you don't get the answer you want, a positive that will get you funding, you simply put it in the file drawer. It's gone. It's in the memory hole. This is great. Are there any insect people around? One of these is a monarch, and one is a viceroy. They're 2 separate butterflies. I can't tell the difference between them, and neither can a bird. So the bird will not eat the viceroy because it thinks it might get a monarch. Now think about writing a scientific paper. In writing a scientific paper, you're constructing a story, and you want your story to appear as correct and wonderful as possible. You're an expert. All the people in this room, they're experts. You can write a good story. You wouldn't be here if you couldn't write a good story. Now think of the consumer. The consumer has to tell the difference between a good story and a bad story. Is it any wonder that we're in a bucket of soup? A little simulation, just a little randomness here. We're random things. What I did is I used random numbers, and I have 20 tumor types, and I have 5 different nations, United States, England, whatever. And I've helped you out a little bit. These are the p-values that are smaller than 0.05. All right, now if I am a disreputable science person, what I would do is I would write a paper and I would say, tumor number 5 is very prevalent in country number 3. That's my first paper. My second paper is tumor number 12 is very prevalent in country number 1. So I've got 2 papers now, and I've got total 4 papers that I can write. Now, I do not put in any of these papers the full table, okay? Because negative results are not important. Now we come to a trick. What is a p-value plot? P-values under the null hypothesis are supposed to be uniformly distributed over the interval 0 to 1. Nice and even. So what we do is we rank order the p-values from smallest to largest. All right, now, and then we plot them against the integers, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 100 in this case. If those p-values fall on a 45-degree line, we're observing the null situation. Here's the data. Here are all the p-values. Here's a p-value plot. Pretty close to a 45-degree line. And we notice that there are a few p-values down here below 0.05. Well, those are the nuggets that we use to write papers. Okay? And we do not show all the rest of this. That would be fatal to our good story enterprise. It's a subtle trick here. Suppose we've done that, but behind every number here, there is an effect, the magnitude of the effect. So let's assume that we really have the null situation we've simulated, and now let's look at the effect. If you have 400 situations that you look at, you expect a t-test of about 3. So behind the null p-values that we looked at, there is a number, and that number is going to be crucially important in the next step of what we're going to do. We're going to look at a meta-analysis. A meta-analysis takes a number from each paper and puts it into a procedure to see how the whole effect is going on. Well, now think backwards. If we're looking at null distributions and we pick the smallest p-value out of 100, the number coming across to the meta-analysis is going to be 3. Yikes. Keep thinking. So what is a meta-analysis? We pick a claim or a question. We do a computer search of the literature. We select papers based on the question, and then we combine the individual results. We combine the individual results. This is a biased number. The main point of a meta-analysis is the number coming into the meta-analysis has to be an unbiased estimator of the question at issue. So if some of the studies are null studies, but they've looked at a lot of things, we have biased numbers coming in. I hate to be crude. Garbage in, garbage out. Okay. These meta-analyses are essentially cookbook now. You have computers to do the search of the literature. You pull off the numbers, you drop them into another program, you get your meta-analysis. A skilled team in China, for example, can produce one meta-analysis per week. They don't care about the question. They care about getting the publication. The government of China will pay them per publication. There are about 5,000 meta-analysis studies that appear every year. Okay, we've talked about p-value plots, and here are 10 examples of p-value plots where the number of p-values is 20. This is a null study. The next thing is an absolute shocker. What did I get when I looked at a meta-analysis? I got this. Okay. These are small p-values indicating there is a real effect. These are null p-values indicating there's no effect. So I'm watching and just completely blown away. Both of these answers cannot be correct. There's either something going on or there's nothing going on. I'm looking at air pollution, JAMA study, heterogeneity, ozone, NO2, PM2.5. What do you see? You see these bilinear forms. So are all of these air components dangerous, causing heart attacks? Or are all of these things null, not causing heart attacks? This is asthma, same thing. Lots of p-values that are really small, lots of p-values that are falling on this no effect line. I'll back up. I think it's a matter of judgment, but I think the small p-values are coming from manipulating, p-hacking, and manipulating covariates. I've told you that there are thousands to hundreds of thousands of possibilities for people to do that, and we have to reach a judgment as to whether these are p-hacks and these are bad studies, or these are the truth and these are p-hacks. Okay, the manager of the system. What can the manager do, the editor? They can require public access to data. That will put the fear of God into these researchers. They ought to put into the title of every paper whether they consider that an exploratory paper or a confirmatory paper. They ought to warn the reader so that we don't have this Monarch, Viceroy kind of thing that the reader has to kind of figure it out. Editors and referees should put that into the title. There should be open refereeing. PLS is doing that, and F1000 is doing that. A lot of people are doing that. Funders. I maintain that you ought to fund the construction of the data set. I'm talking about mainly environmental epidemiology, where there's a lot of problems. The funder ought to fund the data construction and the analysis separately. The person who's doing the analysis should not have control over how the data set is built. They have this psychological thing. This is my data, even though we all paid for it. Then this is harsh, I would not be funding exploratory studies. If I were a government agency, we have hundreds of thousands of exploratory studies out there. We're awash in that. Consumers. We're scientists. We should call out bad studies. So it doesn't take more than half a day to write a letter to the editor and talk about multiple testing and lack of data access. Journalists, I think there's some in the room, please read the base study before you write your article. Okay. Don't take the press release and rearrange the sentences. Okay? Read the actual paper. Citizens. The clear answer here is don't believe a word of it. Okay? But you're paying for it. So write your congressman and tell him to stop paying and start getting good stuff. This has to be controlled by the managers of the system. We cannot talk to the scientists and have them fix things. $50 billion. More, please. Heart attacks with SO2, heart attacks with NO2, I guess it is. SO2, yeah, this is two looks at SO2. We're sitting here in California. The tankers are streaming towards your ports. They're going to offload all their stuff. The people that are deluded are telling them that you have to take the sulfur out of your fuel oil that you use in your tankers. The tanker people do not care. They're simply going to pass that cost on to the next person. $50 billion a year. That's what it's going to cost. Well, you ought to think a bit. I'm getting close to the end of time. Let's see where, I do bike rides and there's a swamp that I go by. So I take a picture of the swamp. We should all dedicate ourselves to help drain the science swamp. Find a meta-analysis and do a Pvalue plot. It can be done in about a half a day. This is my contact information, and I'll stop there. So thank you.